So, Emrys Yucelen was born in Turkey to a family of classical musicians and later moved to California. Starting as a teenager, he supported himself as a musician playing rock music, later playing a variety of different styles. Emrys also does sound healing sessions. He has a degree in literature, registered nursing, and motorcycle repair and maintenance, as well as being certified in shadow work, which he's talking about this evening or today. Emrys joined Connecting Consciousness as a member in 2015 and later volunteered as the Northern California and CC Turkey coordinator. He's currently a CC consulting facilitator and hosts the Performing Arts, Film, Music, Dance group on CC's community platform Mighty Networks. Tonight, we will step into a transformative journey of healing and self-discovery with Emrys as he guides us through the shadow work process, an approach to uncovering the hidden parts of yourself that quietly shape your life. Welcome and thank you, Emrys, and I'll hand over to you.
Hello, and thank you so much for inviting me to do this presentation. And thank you all for joining in. So this presentation is for informational purposes only, and it is not meant to be advice or treatment. So now I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. So shadow work is an advanced topic with many components. I will not have time to talk about every aspect of it, just the juicy bits. But to get the most out of this presentation, you may want to preserve your concentration throughout, so it would make sense as a whole. Also, what I'm going to share is not going to be for everyone. If it resonates with you, that's great, use it. And if not, feel free to let it go. If we are to understand human consciousness, especially while going through this shift where everything is being exposed, we would also need to look at what is hidden within. Shadow work means to make the subconscious conscious. So that is what we're going to be doing today. Also, we will be looking at it from the perspective of the higher self, which operates in frequency and vibration. This is quite different compared to our day-to-day perspective of things. A child is born whole. Upon coming to this earth, they have a single and unified consciousness. As the child starts to socialize, first with their family and then the greater society, they go through experiences that develop them. A child, even as a baby, goes through many experiences one after the other. They're hungry, they're wet, they're itchy, they hear, they see things, they feel things. Since at this period, which is between gestation and around age 7, they don't have a fully developed brain, and so they can't put things in context like we do. They perceive things as felt perception. So that's the best word we can find, felt perception. They, of course, have intuition, and they have neurohormonal triggers that are related to their needs for survival. And based on these experiences, their conscious and subconscious start to form. When they come across a deeply disturbing experience, the totality of their being cannot move forward as one. So a split occurs within the child's consciousness. One aspect continues on, and another aspect stays within the distressing event so that it can resolve it later on when they have the capacity to do so. At that point, an energetic imprint of that specific experience is placed in their subconscious. This can include a feeling, it could be a scent, it could be a texture, a color, could be a sound, it could be an image, and so on. Your soul wants one thing and one thing alone, and that is to make you whole again. Since the child is now carrying a particular energetic imprint of that particular experience, once they become adults, they will be coming across events that carry a similar energetic imprint. These are unpleasant events that we go through as adults. So we can face and resolve those childhood traumas and shine light to what is buried in our subconscious. For example, your father abandoned the family when perhaps you were 4 years old, which you have no memory of. And now, as an adult, you can't keep a relationship together. All your partners seem to leave you for one reason or another. And every time you get super triggered. How this all works is based on a law of attraction, which is the governing law in this world. If you have studied natural law, you probably know about it. So a trauma that a child goes through later on may manifest as flashbacks, nightmares, sleepless nights, fear, addictions, anxiety, depression, uncomfortable thoughts about certain events. It could be low self-esteem, issues of self-harm, could be chronic pain, mental health problems, or you're just not satisfied with your life. However, there's a catch. If you approach the issue as something is wrong with me and it needs to be fixed, it creates further resistance and another often very painful experience will happen. So instead, the best way to go about it is to embrace what is without judgment. And this requires integration using unconditional presence with those feelings, along with self-observation without involving the reasoning mind. If there was no such mechanism that I just explained, you could do anything to a child with no karmic implication. And obviously, that is not how the universe works. Also, if there was no such mechanism, the adults would have no concern for the psychological well-being of the child. And we would simply concentrate on their physical well-being alone. And that also would not make any sense. So keep in mind that as adults, incidents that we think of as minor don't seem minor to a child that is experiencing it. There is what we call extreme trauma. This could be like sexual abuse, war, things like that. But then there's also seemingly small experiences that can traumatize a child. The child's imagination, emotions, vulnerability, social conditions play a big role in this. For example, your mother gave birth to a sibling, and now instead of you, they're getting all the attention. At that point, you may separate from your identity as a survival mechanism to be able to cope with the situation. When we become adults, we falsely think that our childhood has ended. In reality, our child self, stays alive within us. Its perceptions and beliefs continue to shape our lives. Many of us continue to survive and ignore the feelings from our childhood. But to become whole again, we need to be brave enough to face these wounds. It is our adult self that holds the key to integration. We will always stay an orphan if we wait for someone else to take care of our past that need caring. This is what we call inner child work. As I mentioned, traumatic experience that we don't have the capacity to deal with at the time are placed in the subconscious for survival purposes and to be resolved at a later time. But aspects of ourselves that we abandon on the way are also placed in the subconscious. The reason being, abandoned aspects of ourselves in and of itself is a trauma. And this is what we most often miss and are unaware of as adults. And I'll be going more into that. When a child is born and they're whole, in their mind, everything is possible. There's no limitation. By definition, this requires all aspects of a person to be present and available. Now, for the sake of this presentation, I'd like you to suspend judgment about an objective idea of good and bad, and instead simply consider human psychology regarding good and bad and how that relates to a person's ego. We come to a place where ideas are polarized and presented to us as good and bad, right and wrong, acceptable and unacceptable. This is our perspective at this point in time, at this plane, but it is not a natural state. As we are socialized, the aspects of us that are seen as acceptable are welcomed and rewarded. And the aspects of us that are seen as unacceptable, and these could be both positive things and negative things, are rejected. The ideas that are labeled as good, we make part of our ego, and which is our self-concept. And the ideas that are labeled as bad are buried in our subconscious. Being relationally dependent to our caregivers, the only way for us to survive is to go along with what is considered to be good in that family and society. So we will disown, deny, and suppress the aspects of ourselves that are disapproved of, while exaggerating those that are approved of. In essence, we dissociate from what we know is disapproved of. Everyone goes through this, of this process of splitting themselves in parts. And this is when we as children start to love ourselves less and less. From that point on, just like a magnet, we're attracted to what we subconsciously believe to be good, and we're repulsed by what we subconsciously believe to be bad. This way, we're unable to develop the capacity for discernment, because to discern, we have to be able to put things in perspective based on accurate observation in real time with no prior programming. Besides labeling people and behaviors as good and bad, we also label activities, ideas, and even what we want to do in life as good and bad. For example, as a child, you may be interested in music, but your family forces you to abandon that idea, stating, if you become a musician, you will starve. To survive, you need to survive or have a good life, you need to become an engineer or a doctor. This forces the child to abandon an entire creative aspect of themselves. This could also be something like forcing an ambidextrous child to write with only the right hand. And telling children how things work instead of letting them figure things out on their own, or constantly doing things for our children so they don't suffer, which is the parents' programming. And similarly, there are parents who always cook for their children. I'm giving these as examples, and take them out to eat, which results in them not feeling the need to learn how to cook, which also is an aspect of a children. Being good parents means respecting a child's sense of self, their capacity to experiment, make mistakes, fail, try again, and eventually succeed. So this whole thing is you can see it as a cycle. So experiment, make mistakes, fail, try again, and succeed. When growing up, if this cycle doesn't happen repeatedly, they will not know that they can succeed, which will result in low self-esteem. It may even push them to manipulate others to get what they want. Shakespeare said, "Nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." What good and bad is primarily determined by our family and the social group that we grow up in, and it differs from culture to culture and family to family. So there's no clear distinction amongst humans as to what is good versus bad. For example, one culture may consider sexuality a virtue, and the other may consider it a sin. One family may consider self-centeredness to be a necessary part of success and servitude to be weakness. Another family may believe exactly the opposite. So instead of teaching children what is good and bad, we can help them with experiences that provide higher levels of awareness, consciousness, and perception. This way, they can make their own decisions, have their own choices, and experience what they came here to experience without having to reject aspects of themselves that are necessary for their development. So, no awareness is no possibility. Infinite awareness is all possibility. Each one of us reside somewhere in between. So how do we develop a high level of awareness, consciousness, and perception? One way is to learn how the subconscious works and do shadow work, and another, hopefully, we will do both at the same time, is to practice and consciousness. It's A and D consciousness. You may have heard of Buddha's concept of the middle path, which is the practice of balance through moderation, basically avoiding the extremes. At first, this may sound like a good idea, but it limits everything that we do. Sometimes it may be to our benefit to choose and experience an extreme, but then the idea is not to stay there. So instead, one can practice end consciousness. End consciousness is a state of mind where you develop the ability to hold space for extremes. It develops mental and emotional maturity. For example, you found a job and that you like to do, but at the same time, you like to spend leisure time with your partner. Or you want to keep your child safe, but you also want them to explore and learn for themselves. In a situation like this, if you have not developed the capacity to be present with a contradiction, you will most likely be inclined to side with one or the other. It may lead to confusion, and you may make rash decisions to release yourself from the pressure and perhaps feel torn. Being faced with two opposing truths may feel like a big stretch for you. The practice of end consciousness does not call you to limit the extremes to find equilibrium, but instead, it requires you to expand wide enough to be able to accommodate both extremes. This will actually make the contradictions complementary. What is more, the moment we expand wide enough to be able to hold both, as if holding both is okay, we have disidentified from them both. We have ceased to become either or, and instead we have become the thing that is holding both. By holding both, instead of our aspects being separated, we have created a state of integration or wholeness within our being. Essentially, end consciousness becomes the unifying factor. So far, most everything that we do in this world is to avoid something negative. We want money to not be poor. We want to be in a relationship to not feel lonely, and so on. What if we did things through focused presence and loving care, and not because of something that is unwanted or lacking? So I'm going to give you an example. It has been said that desire is the cause of all suffering. Well, desire in itself is pure and facilitates expansion. And there's nothing wrong with desiring something. It becomes a problem when we experience lack first, because then you have attachment to whatever you're desiring. Whenever we're faced with lack, we should look at our past, find and integrate the origin of it. After that, we can desire without attachment, and we can actually have whatever it is that we desire. Desire with attachment is actually the byproduct of the ego, and it comes from our subconscious. So pure desire and lack first and then desire after is two completely different vibrations. Peace is much more than the absence of war. It is the absence of internal conflict. It is the absence of polarity. So our minds have three departments: conscious, subconscious, and superconscious. We all know what conscious mind is. So the subconscious mind is the aspect of human mind that controls all autonomic functions of human life. It controls, for example, the heartbeat, body temperature, digestion, things like that. And even when we're not consciously aware of these things, they continue to function. So the subconscious mind is in control of everything that you're not attending to in any given time. But the subconscious mind also controls your beliefs, your memories, skills that are acquired, like muscle memory. If we had to consciously think and do everything that our bodies do, then we wouldn't be nearly as productive as we're now. So we could say that the subconscious mind takes over everything that interferes with the conscious mind. It can save our lives in an instant, like when you step aside from the front of an oncoming car, but it can also harm us in the long run. For example, you were hurt when your parents got a divorce, and now as an adult, you subconsciously have the belief that loving another person is dangerous. So you subconsciously sabotage your relationships. The subconscious mind is simply power without any kind of direction. So whatever you feel deeply, imagine clearly, and repeat is impressed upon it and carried out. The subconscious mind, now we're going into the superconscious mind. The superconscious mind is the God mind within each person, and it is the realm of the perfect ideas. It is said that each one of us has a purpose in life, a place that we are to fill, something we are to do. Most people are far from expressing this because they have been stamped by the contrary pictures upon the subconscious. And the subconscious has carefully carried out their orders, its orders. So they will meet these thoughts as concrete experiences in life. Wherever you go, whatever you do, you take these conditions with you. Your expectations are also based on your subconscious imprints. Our life's purpose usually flashes across our conscious mind as an unattainable idea, but it is attainable if we developed the level of awareness that is required. So our shadow is the sum of all negative imprints that are blocking us in doing so. We see children lovingly absorbed in their play. We can only be successful in life if this is continued in adulthood and if we do things that interest us greatly. So never force a child to do or to be something they do not want. They will only prove a failure. Intuition flies out the window when reason comes to the door. Doubts, fears, and negative imprints suppress intuition. The first step towards success is to be glad you're yourself. Many people are bored by themselves. They have no self-reliance and are always wishing they were someone else. A person with a rich consciousness attracts riches. A person with a poor and limiting consciousness attracts poverty. When we are undisturbed by a situation, it falls away of its own weight. The truth is, you're in a long-term relationship, actually you're in a long-term arranged marriage with yourself. The sooner you find out what is in your subconscious and integrate it, the sooner you will develop self-love. Raising emotionally healthy children is a big part of this topic, which directly impacts the heart of our lives. However, it is not something that I can explain in a few words and in a few minutes. What I can say is that the goal of parenting today is still to raise obedient children. So we're still in dark ages. Parenting must involve proper emotional guidance. Dismissing the child's emotions or punishing them for the way they express their emotions that we don't approve of is a big problem. This, of course, leads to dysfunctional relationships later on in life. We are social beings, and emotions are the heart of every relationship. So realize this. It is not the uncomfortable feelings themselves that hurt us. It is the resistance to them that causes pain. So I'm going to get into attraction and projection. You may very well overcompensate for whatever trait you have denied yourself. And in this way, we tend to live in extremes. We also attract people into our lives that represent the extreme in us. Initially, they seem like they're different than us, but they really are not. Our partners or people that are close to us tend to be our mirroring, the opposites tend to be our mirroring image, our opposing mirror. For example, someone who is artistic, imaginative, and laid back may end up with someone who is logical, disciplined, and goal-oriented, each reflecting the suppressed aspect of the other. When we grow up and meet someone, if they carry a negative trait of ourselves that we rejected, we get triggered in a negative way. If they carry a positive trait of ourselves that we rejected, then we like them, perhaps have a crush on them, idealize them, or maybe fall in love with them. And we may get addicted to spending time with them. It feels like our opportunity to become whole again. We glorify and idolize their aspects. This is what happens when a member of the audience falls in love with a rock star, for example, which means a lot of the time, whether we're attracted or repulsed by someone, we do it based on what is hidden in our subconscious. We can see the thing in another person that we're totally unaware of in ourselves. This actually is what projection is. A lot of people think when someone is projecting something, they're projecting it to a person who does not have that trait. But this is not true. Projection is almost always a two-way street. We recognize the trait on others because it causes a flare-up of the wound, a rejected aspect within. Telling someone you're projecting has actually become a cop-out mechanism, but you can't consciously see someone clearly until you're completely conscious of yourself. If you aren't, you'll continue to see everyone through the filter of your own subconscious mind. Every time we tell someone you're just projecting, we miss the opportunity to see something in us that is hiding in our subconscious. Because, see, for this to happen, we need to be a vibrational match. So everyone projects, and this is how we become aware of what we have dissociated into our subconscious. In short, whatever you're rejecting and disapproving in others, you're rejecting and disapproving in yourself. Your authentic self is whole. When parts of ourselves are disowned, denied, and rejected, we slowly become inauthentic. We become a walking facade that we think is real. And this is quite a painful state. Eventually, we may have anxiety, we may have depression, and if not taken care of, this could even turn into physical illness. Drama is a state of intense internal conflict. More conflict a person has within, the more conflict and drama they're going to experience in life. You may not want drama in your life, but drama is not about the people around you. It is about the conflict within you. So if you get rid of all the dramatic people around you, most likely they will be replaced by other dramatic people. Similarly, if you're a person who hates drama, then you may be someone who invalidates other people's feelings. This is because over the course of your life, you have learned to invalidate your own feelings. So whenever you notice that you have resistance to drama, remember that everyone reacts in accordance within the reality they're perceiving based on their past experience, including the ones they don't remember. So it is not a very good idea to judge people. If you want to become enlightened, see and accept your negative traits. Since there is no clear distinction amongst humans as to what is good versus bad, but humans form their identity based on that notion anyway, the single most important thing to the human ego is to believe itself to be good. When we do that, shame becomes the #1 enemy of the human ego. This way, it also is the single biggest blind spot that we possess, as well as the single biggest barrier to self-awareness and enlightenment. We tend to be completely unaware or unable to see when we are doing things in a way that are hurting others. In order to avoid shame, we cope by deflection, denial, and reframing, so we can believe ourselves to be good. Deflection, by the way, is the act of blaming another rather than taking responsibility for our actions. And it is a psychological defense mechanism. You will spend your life trying to become anything that you associate with what is good, per your programming, and trying to see that in yourself. Likewise, you will spend your entire life trying to avoid what you consider to be good, to consider to be bad, and your mind will actively avoid seeing those traits in yourself. This way, you don't feel the need to change. You can spin just about anything in order to maintain the idea that you are good, which would make self-awareness almost impossible. Let's give some examples. For example, a parent can punish their children in cruel ways and believe that they are good because this will teach the children to be disciplined. Or a person can shoot another and convince himself that he is good because he is preserving the values of his community. In fact, every war ever waged was initiated this way. Subconsciously, the ego says, I have to make you bad so I can be good. And so, without being aware, we perpetuate the suffering on this world. It also means we will be perpetually gaslighting others, and we will be perpetually be gaslighted by them. This also is one of the biggest reasons the relationships are so difficult. The blind spot created by this attachment to seeing ourselves as good is so big that it can accommodate entire realities. This is, in fact, the primary cause of the split experienced between parents and children. Sometimes they live in completely different worlds. For example, a parent can live in a reality where they believe they gave birth to their child, and then they provided their child with every material need so they don't suffer. On the other hand, their child can live in a reality where none of that really matters because their emotional needs were not met. If we wish to awaken, you have to be willing to face the discomfort of our negative traits. You have to be willing to see the impact we are having on other people. And we have to commit to seeing ourselves through other people's eyes and from their perspective. We must take them as part of ourselves, and we have to discern what is ours, what is theirs, and remedy what is ours. This is basically what law of one is. So the safest and the most awakened person is the one who sees their own shadow. And this is the only kind of person who is capable of creating a world that is conscious, authentic, and harmonious. On the other hand, the most dangerous and also the least awakened person is the person who is convinced they're good and will spin things to benefit themselves. We must see and take care of our negative traits lovingly, not judgmentally, lovingly. So it ceases to be a detriment to our lives and the lives of others. Self-awareness does not come naturally to those who avoid pain. So now, how should we deal with negative emotions? The way we deal with negative emotions dictates how healthy and unhealthy our relationships are from an emotional perspective. And here are the steps. First, become aware of other person's emotions. Care about the other person's emotions by seeing them as valid and important. Listen empathetically to the other person's emotion in an attempt to understand the way they feel. This allows them to feel safe enough to be vulnerable without fear of judgment. Seek to understand instead of to agree. Acknowledge and validate their feelings. This may include helping them to find words to label their emotions. To acknowledge a person's feelings, we don't need to validate their thoughts. For example, if they say, I feel useless, we don't say, yeah, you're right. But instead, we may say, I can understand how that would make you feel useless. I would feel the same way if I were you. Allow the person to feel how they feel and to experience their emotions fully. This step we often miss, so it's very important. Allow the person to feel how they feel and to experience their emotions fully before moving toward any kind of improvement in the way they feel. We need to give them permission to dictate when they're ready to move up to a better feeling state. We should not impose them our idea of when they should be ready. This is the part where we practice unconditional focused presence and unconditional love. We are there to support them. We're not trying to fix them. If they don't want your support at this time, don't be offended. There is a benevolent power in offering. It is up to them to accept it or not. After and only after their feelings have been validated, acknowledged, and fully felt, help them strategize ways to manage the reactions they might be having to their emotions. This is when you may suggest a new perspective to the situation and offer advice if they ask for it. We're all in a relationship with ourselves. So when we're dealing with our own emotions, the steps that I just outlined about here are pretty much the same. You must validate your emotions and not dismiss them, regardless of how they may make you feel. As we learn about shadow work and slowly connect the dots, the question switches from what is wrong with you to what happened to you. Judgment is replaced by curiosity. It is easy to reject someone for the way they're acting Not so easy to find out what happened to them and help them recover from their subconscious imprints. I'm going to talk a little bit about the suppressed memory. So when we go through serious trauma, the memory of the entire situation can be unconsciously blocked, even though the memory affects the person. This happens when the person cannot understand or otherwise process the incident to make it fit into a context. Then, for the sake of survival, they would suppress the memory, uh, sometimes in its entirety, and the memory is dissociated from the self, but nevertheless stored in a fragmented way, meaning the aspects of the memory, like sound, taste, texture, color, smell, sight, emotion, etc., are stored separately. This is why when we start to remember, we often remember these aspects one by one in a fragmented fashion. For example, a person that has been abused as a child may easily be triggered by a certain scent as an adult, but they may have no visual memory of the actual event that is triggering them. For example, while walking on the street, they may suddenly feel nauseous and or have an anxiety attack. The scent brings back the terror aspect of the past event, but not the whole memory. So it seems completely random, and the person may think they may be going crazy. It serves the mind to dissociate, so you don't have to experience the pain associated with that experience. It is tempting to believe that only to people who have gone through extreme trauma has suppressed memory, but that is not the case. Everyone seems to have it. Basically, if you don't have a mechanism to integrate the trauma that you experienced as a child, then you must dissociate from it for survival. Now, let's talk a little bit about positive focus. There is great focus on being positive, especially in spiritual circles. It feels like the magic pill that will allow us to avoid all the things that we don't want. Positive focus can and does work. However, there's one big exception. It works on everything except for the things you're trying to use positive focus to avoid. Like it or not, big part of consciousness is going to be dedicated to past traumas. There is simply no way around this. So concentrating on the positive and not looking at your subconscious does not heal the splits in your consciousness. Just the opposite, your subconscious will secretly run your life. There's a big difference between focusing on positive to gain a positive outlook on life versus versus focusing on the positive to run away from that which is negative. The latter one is a state of resistance. The more you suppress your shadow, the more it festers. The law of attraction, which is the governing law of this universe, states that whatever vibrations you carry within, are going to be mirrored back to you on your daily lives. For this to stop, they need to be integrated. Positive focus, when used incorrectly, causes you to bypass your shadow. If you have noticed, I avoid using the terms high and low because in truth, each one of us exists in multiple dimensions at the same time. These are all different expressions of the same consciousness. But just to make it easier to understand, I have a mosquito. But just to make it easier to understand, we can see the highest level as all is integrated, all is one, and we can see the lower levels as seemingly separate dimensions of the self in layers. So at your highest level, your physical, etheric, feeling, thinking, and spiritual selves are also all integrated and one. Similarly, in the physical plane, we have the sense of a linear time. In the non-physical plane, everything happens simultaneously. Basically, time is as it is perceived based on where you reside, which opens us to big possibilities. Let's say that a 5-year-old child was pushed to eat something that they didn't want to eat. At the time, he felt so powerless that now, as a teenager, he has an eating disorder. Since the feeling body has no sense of linear time, fixing the problem in our imagination has the same effect as literally traveling back in time and stopping the parent from forcing that food item. During shadow work, this is what we do. The feeling body versus the emotional body. I'm going to be talking about that now. These are two separate things. So intimacy can be broken down as into me, see. It means to see into one another, to deeply connect, and to know one another for the person each one of us truly are. If the core of who you are is your emotions, then the language of the soul is feelings. So then the most important part of intimacy is emotional connection. Your feeling body is etheric, and it is different than your emotional body. There is continuous exchange of information back and forth between the physiological body and the higher aspects of the self. When you have an experience, the information about the experience enters the mental body. There, your thoughts are converted into feeling impressions. Within the physical body, they're converted into neuropeptides and hormones. Within the physiological body, we feel them as emotions. We could say that an emotion is a physiological experience of the feeling. Emotions do not exist outside of the body, but feelings do. If you didn't have feelings, nothing would seem real on the physical plane, since the chain of events I just mentioned won't occur at all. The feeling body is a translator between the physical experience and non-physical experience. You can also look at it as the translator between the observing consciousness and the first person physical-based awareness. You can sense the feeling body as energy, or you can ask to be shown the visual representation of your feeling body, for example, while meditation. Sometimes this is what we do while we're doing shadow work. So in time and with practice, you could see it without needing to be in an altered state. So interpretations of events are part of the feeling body. So your interpretation of your life will lead to a physical reflection of mirroring. So that is the mechanism. So we have been into this almost an hour. So I'm not going to go into the process itself. So if you want to know in detail how we do the process, I can tell you where to find that. But let me talk a little bit about what it's about. So a trigger is an upset that you feel in response Actually, these are the steps of the shadow work in itself. So you can take a look at it, or I can give you a minute to take a look at it if you like. But without knowing the details, it may not make as much sense. So a trigger is an upset you feel in response to an experience where your reaction is stronger than what would be considered reasonable. This actually is the right time to do shadow work. If you must delay the process because of the circumstances, do it as soon as possible. Most people who commit to shadow work are perfectly capable of managing whatever comes up and find a relief. However, it is always a good idea to have someone you can call for support if needed. If at any time something comes up that you think you cannot cope with, please call for professional help. At the beginning, it is best to study shadow work thoroughly and do it with a trusted person or a facilitator who knows about it. So after we do the shadow work, what happens? We will have this sense of freedom of peace. Like forgiveness, peace cannot be forced. You cannot just decide to be peaceful because it isn't something you do, but rather it is something that organically occurs within you in response to healing. You may not be aware of it, but peace is not a state that is purely positive. It is a state that transcends opposites. Peace actually transcends both the negative and the positive. Many people look at an enlightened person and assume that they feel positive emotions all the time. And this is why they behave the way they do. The truth is, an enlightened person has made a practice of releasing all resistance from their being. It is not that they never feel conflict or pain, it's that they're willing to be open to experiencing conflict and pain. Once you become willing to feel, you no longer resist conflict or pain, and you will no longer fear the future. In the absence of resistance, you will find peace. Another gift that this process will give you is compassionate understanding. You will begin to see that all behavior, no matter how malevolent it may seem, is done in an effort to find unconditional love. Once this is understood, you will find that the behaviors of the people around you will start to make more sense. Once you understand something or someone, then you have no reason to feel fear, or you have no reason to fear them. Every single act in existence, whatever it is, wanting to kiss someone or kill someone, is done for one reason and one reason only: wanting to feel better. So a person who is feeling a clash in their conscious may want to kill someone, but this is so that they can feel better. So now you also understand that during your childhood, you formed an unconscious definition of love by watching and interacting with your primary caregivers. As an adult, you will live your life according to this early definition, regardless of how healthy or unhealthy it might be. This means if we were shamed as child, we associate love with feelings of being shamed. Thus, we seek out partners who will shame us. Shadow work will shine light and truth to the situation. As we practice more, we will notice these patterns in people around us and in the world. Consider the far-reaching implications of this whole concept. So shadow work will not only create peace within, but it will create peace and compassionate love worldwide. Here is the list of life-changing benefits. Improved physical health. We are less reactive to stressors, boosted energy, better understanding of yourself, not so easily manipulated or controlled, increased self-love, self-trust, and confidence, healthier relationships, stopping negative coping behaviors, learn to live in the now, find more joy and happiness, our creativity expands, we find our purpose, we stop trying to change others, pleasant dreams, feelings of childhood innocence come back, we learn to play once again with each other, we become less lonely, we learn to be alone without fear, our intuition opens up, and we experience greater abundance. Are you being led by your spirit or your wound? That's all I got.
Thank you, Emrys. That was extremely enlightening and a lot of information. And we do have a series of questions. Becky, would you like to start with a question?
Well, yes, I'm happy to start reading. So I was just thinking whether you were asking about my own questions.
Either.
I'll just pick one that's someone who's written. But Emrys, I absolutely loved your talk, and I have heard you speak about this before, and it's very, very interesting, and I do agree with it. How does one go about discovering a suppressed memory?
Okay, that's the process of shadow work that I skipped because it's good to do it after you kind of really know about all the details, but I can describe it in short. So since the different feeling sensations of the event, a suppressed event that is in our subconscious, exist in fragmented pieces, when we put our brain into the theta mode, we have access to that event and those feeling sensations or felt perception. So basically, we could lay down and close our eyes and focus on a message that our body is trying to give us. So this works really good, especially when you're triggered. So for example, you may feel a pressure on your chest. So just feel with that pressure and see where it takes you. But you need to shut down your thinking, reasoning mind. Otherwise, it's not going to work because then you're going to be, oh, that happened, then it happened this, and you're going to write a story. So you need to completely shut that off to be able to go into wherever your subconscious wants to take you. But also, you're going to be able to do this only when you're ready for it. If you are fearful or you have resistance to going back into your shadow work, or if you think that, oh, I'm not going to be able to deal with it because I wasn't able to deal with it when it happened when I was a child and it was very painful, I don't want to go there. So it's not going to work. So, but if you have the knowledge and the awareness and you want to go there consciously as an adult, just follow what your body is telling you. This is an organic process. So, and your soul will actually give you all the details so that you can resolve it. And it's kind of like a rope. So you felt the pressure on your chest, for example, and then it may turn into a texture, and then it may turn into a sound. You may realize that you went to an experience you have go through this experience when you were 25 years old, and then a similar experience happened when you were 14 years old, and then you keep pulling on that rope, and then you're going to find the original event that perhaps happened when you were 3 or 4 years old. And then all of a sudden, even though it was never in your memory, you may start reliving the entire event. And then you have the opportunity of being there with your child self and the adult self, and then help your child self resolve the issue and to understand it. And once that happens, you join the two and you're not fractured anymore. But before we go into this process, we actually create a safe haven, a safe space. So that is part of the this treatment, or this is part of this integration modality. And we also use that while we're doing shadow work. So that's how it's done.
Thank you very much, Emrys. That was a very good and detailed answer. Over to Angela.
Thanks, Becky. So I think this question kind of maybe more people would have asked it, and maybe were feeling that they didn't want to say they didn't really understand totally what you were talking about. But what they're saying is, if I understand correctly, shadow work starts with letting go of the resistance you feel against your negative traits. Now they're open to shadow work, but they just don't know where to start.
I studied shadow work in person with Teal Swan. Teal Swan is there's all kinds of ideas about her on the internet, but she's actually a brilliant mind. And she went to a lot of trauma, and she actually used all the negative things to become who she became today. She has a fantastic book that is called The Completion Process. So shadow work has many different names. Some people call it completion process, or Teal Swan calls it completion process. Some people call it wholeness process, and there's all kinds of other names for it, depending on how you practice it. And once you become good at it, you don't do it just that one strict certain way, but you kind of improvise based on who you are and based on who you might be working on if you're working on another person. So I suggest that you buy that book and read it at least 3 times, and then you'll have a really good understanding of what shadow work is.
Thanks, Emrys.
You're welcome.
Becky?
Thank you very much, Emrys. Okay, so let's have another look at a question. How does shadow work relate to past lives? Can you resolve past life trauma and mitigate aspects of the shadow?
I was going to say in the beginning that I don't really want to get into past life trauma, because then it becomes really complex, but that's okay. Well, it's similar. If you have come to this world carrying a energetic imprint that comes from your past life, it's going to show up in your life, just like how the trauma is showing up in this life. But it may be slightly harder to get to it compared to something that happened in this life, but it is the same process.
Okay, thank you, Emrys.
But the other thing is, when you're doing this, of course, you're gonna see your past self in a different life. So it's gonna look a lot more bizarre than a trauma that happened in this life.
Mm.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. I'll hand over to Angela, but I'd like to ask another question related to that, actually.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, okay, thank you, Angela. Since we exist in many dimensions, are we clearing this lifetime we are currently in, or are we working on ourselves across all dimensions? If we are able, we are also dealing with the trauma for instance, from our ancestors as well. And the reason I'm interested in this question is because I'm currently doing somatic yoga, and I am finding that I can, using somatic yoga, heal certain aspects of myself that I know not only I had, but my mom and my gran and so on, certain things. And I'm wondering whether that's actually healing back through the DNA. You know, if someone has a trauma, say 5 generations ago, and it has a knock-on impact on their DNA, and perhaps that expresses itself in a certain condition in younger generations. And this is something I'm just thinking about because I'm working on that to sort of heal back through a line. Does that make sense? Karen was talking about it across dimensions, but also going back in the past.
That's a great question. So we come to this world, and then our first imprints are the imprints of our parents, caregivers. That's when you get all the traumas that happened to your ancestors, your parents and their parents and all that stuff. And the biggest reason where they say, oh, you got an illness and that's genetic, it's not really genetic. It's because you have the same thoughts as your parents. They passed it on to you and you have the same illness. So, when it comes to our different aspects of ourselves and different levels of existence, yes, they all exist at the same time. And your higher self sees all of them, knows all of them, but your lower self doesn't perceive it that way. But the more you do shadow work, and the more actually as you do shadow work, your DNA is going to change also. See, our physical bodies are a direct reflection of our DNA as well. So if you could see your subconscious, which this whole concept is about, then you have passed from 3D to 4D, and you're getting more closer to your higher self. And then you're going to feel like you're more connected to it. That's what ascension is all about. Does that make sense? Does that work?
Absolutely. Yes, it does. Thank you very
Everything is a reflection of each other. So your thoughts are a reflection of what you see. Your thoughts are a reflection of your DNA, your physical being, as above, so below. There's like 13 natural laws. The natural laws uh, would be another good Zoom meeting, totally pertain to shadow work. And law of attraction is the all-comprehensive natural law. It includes all of them. That's how nature works.
Thank you. And what you resist persists is another one. That's one that you mentioned a bit earlier. Lovely. Thank you, Emrys. Angela.
Thanks. So, Emma, someone asked, how do I stand by or help my adult children setting things right that I, as a well-meaning mother, encouraged, for example, to write with her right hand instead of her left hand? Because when they're kids, they feel the negative effects of things. And now, how can I help facilitate their healing?
Healing. Well, small children don't really need healing. They need not to be broken. So they are perfectly capable of figuring things out on their own. We just need to keep them safe. That's the idea. But that cycle that I mentioned earlier, experimenting, failing, experimenting again, failing, and then doing it over and over again, and then finally succeeding. That has to happen many, many times when they're growing up. If you're helping the child with things, explaining things, it's like, oh, this is how the car works. Well, you're not helping them if you did that. They need to figure out how the car works. So what you may want to do is, how do you think the car works? And they're going to tell you a story from their imaginative mind. Of course, it's not going to match how the car really works, but step by step, maybe you're going to ask it again in a few days, and step by step, they're going to figure it out. So this process is like so incredibly important. If you give things readily to children, they're not going to have discernment. And this is why we have an entire world full of people who doesn't have the capacity to discern. And this is why, as humanity, we're so easy to manipulate, because we have just left a big black space and all the parasitic people using that space to manipulate us. So it's always a two-way connection. Does that make sense?
Be specific, Emrys. This person was asking, this is relating to adult children, that they're past their childhood, and now they're wondering, is there something that can help facilitate their healing as an adult?
Well, adult children, they need to do shadow work, basically. So a parent wants to help their adult child. That's a good one. So the question is, are they willing to do the work, or are they living in a space where they have a lot of resistance? If they have a lot of resistance, it's going to be very difficult for them to do this work. What would happen is be with them unconditionally, not try to change them. And all the steps that I've given earlier about dealing with negative emotions, how to deal with negative emotions. Just be present with them without judging them, and be with them unconditionally, so that they may trust you and open up to you at one point. But if you're trying to fix them, they're going to have more and more resistance towards opening up to you and healing their wounds. I misunderstand the question, sorry.
Perfect. You answered afterward, but both answers were sufficiently acceptable, because there are plenty of people who have young children, and this person just wanted it to relating to an adult child, and you did both. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Becky?
Okay, I was going to ask a question that's in the panel, but I think I won't, because the question's generally about how can we help someone else with their shadow work. But in my real understanding, the shadow work is part of the personal spiritual journey. It's doing your own spiritual work. The only way we can help others really is perhaps A, by modeling it ourselves, and B, by talking about it, and sort of C, by perhaps giving pointers, but you can never make someone else do their own shadow work, because they'll do it as and when they want to. So for me, it is part of the personal spiritual journey, and Chris and I have talked about this in our monthly spiritual topics in the foundational year, which you've all been going through this year. So Emrys, I just wanted your comments on this as well, in your understanding on this.
That is an excellent question. This is how it works. So there are two people, for example, a mother and a daughter. Let's give it as an example. They are emotionally enmeshed, right? And they're struggling with each other. If one person, let's say in this case, the mother, advances in their level of awareness and consciousness, it is going to directly affect the other person. You could be in the completely far ends of the world. You could even be one could be in the moon and one could be on the planet. It's gonna affect the other person because time and place doesn't apply at that point. So if this person is advancing, this person is gonna realize it and they're gonna wonder what the hell is going on. And since they're so enmeshed, they're gonna understand what is going on and they're gonna try to find out what's going on, follow you, ask questions. So if you heal yourself, if you change in your level of awareness, you're actually healing the other person because of the energetic enmeshment. But as I described the, the lower self, higher self thing, there's also other dimensions about that. If you go to the very, very top, that's the God consciousness. There is no whole bunch of people. There's only one. That's the law of one. There's only one person. In reality, we don't see that. But if you're actually healing yourself, you're contributing to the entire well-being of the planet. You should only be really healing yourself. And of course, if people ask for help, you can be there for them. But that is the idea.
Thank you, Emrys. I love that answer because that is basically fundamentally why we are doing the spiritual topics to try and help people to do their the personal spiritual journey in the shadow work and healing. And thank you so much for your explanation, very, very clear explanation on your kind of shadow work that you've learnt from Teal Swan, because it absolutely fits in with the overall model. And we heal ourselves, we take the steps to heal ourselves, and we are genuinely helping humanity. So thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome.
So, Emrys, someone asked, they're the last of their blood lineage. Does that mean by doing their own clearing that they're clearing the entire lineage along with their own current incarnation?
Oh, I wouldn't want to answer that. That could be complicated. Then you're going into all kinds of other things. Yeah, I'm not going to answer that question. Sorry.
Can I ask you just a quick one? Someone asked, is shadow work the same as mirror work?
Nah, I haven't heard that. Yeah, I'd have to know the details. But shadow work isn't something new. It exists. It existed in texts that's coming from like hundreds of years ago from like India. They were talking about this whole concept. This isn't anything new. It's just there are cycles in the world, and this is another cycle that where we have to integrate ourselves. And shadow work is not healing. Healing is kind of like fixing. Shadow work is integrating. Shadow work is, you split into many different parts. Now you're putting all those parts together. We don't need to be fixed. Fixing also has the idea of like resistance. No, we just lovingly go back, find our parts. That's part of being on this planet. There's nothing wrong with it. We just find the pieces, put it back together.
Becky, would you like to ask the last question?
The very last question, which has just turned up now, due to abuse as a child, can your subconscious be damaged?
No, subconscious doesn't get damaged. It's your consciousness that gets fractured. So you either dissociate from the event or you are fractured into pieces, which are kind of like similar. So yeah, you can't really damage anything in the big picture. So yeah, the trauma could be so severe that it could be very difficult to integrate the trauma. That is possible, that happens. But yeah, and some people cannot do it. Some people, it's too extreme that they feel so helpless. Sometimes they commit suicide, but then they come back and try it again. So that's how I see it.
Thank you,
Well,
Emrys.
I want to thank you, Emrys, and if you want to take the last couple of minutes to offer any resources that you want to share with people or where they can find more information about shadow work.
Yeah, Teal Swan's completion process is a good one. And see, once you get into learning something, if you're really passionate about it, all the resources are going to come to you. You don't really need to kind of get everything in one moment. So I got into this in 2014, and it was just like a hail that came afterwards, one after the other. All the books came to my direction, and I was so passionate about reading them all. So just start with one. There's another person, Robert Brown, who writes about this. He calls it something else. I forgot it, but whole bunch of them. You'll figure it out.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and sharing all of this with everyone. And I thank everyone for coming today. This has been a beautiful event, and I hope you'll come back and join us on the next Worldwide Voices. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.